there is a version of you that does not exist yet. Not because you lack the talent, not because you lack the time, but because you handed the keys to someone else and called it love. You gave another person the power to determine how your day feels. Whether you wake up light or heavy. Whether you move through the world with clarity or spend the next 6 hours analyzing a text message that was probably nothing. That is not connection. That is captivity. And the most disturbing part? You built the cage yourself. Most people think emotional dependence is about weakness. They think it only happens to unstable people, broken people, people who haven't figured themselves out yet. But that's not how it works. Emotional dependence doesn't target the weak. It targets the ones who care deeply, the ones who feel everything fully, the ones who, once they attach completely. And there is nothing wrong with caring deeply. The problem is when caring deeply becomes needing desperately. When the line between, I want this person in my life, becomes, I cannot function without their presence. When their silence ruins your concentration. When their approval becomes the measuring stick for your own worth. When you find yourself shrinking, adjusting, performing, not because you want to, but because you are terrified of what happens if they pull away. That terror, that's the thing worth examining. The man who needs another person to feel whole has already surrendered the one thing no one can afford to give away, his own center. The first truth you need to understand is this. Emotional dependence is never really about the other person. You think it is. It feels like it is. It feels like this specific person has something you need, something rare, something that cannot be found anywhere else. And that feeling of irreplaceability, is the trap. Because here is what is actually happening beneath the surface. At some point, you decided, probably without knowing it, that you were not enough on your own, that your peace was conditional, that your sense of self required external confirmation to feel real. And so you found someone, and you poured into them everything you should have been building inside yourself. Your calm, your confidence, your sense of direction. And once you've done that, once you've outsourced your inner world to another person, their absence doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes everything. That's not love. That's a structural dependency. And structures that depend on one point of support collapse the moment that point moves. Think about the last time they didn't respond quickly. What happened inside you? Be honest about it. You started constructing stories. You replayed the last conversation looking for the moment things shifted. You checked the phone more times than you can count. You felt a dull, persistent anxiety that had nothing to do with anything real, only with the silence. And when they finally responded, the relief you felt was enormous. Too enormous. Relief that large tells you something. It tells you that your nervous system was operating in a state of threat, not danger. Threat. The anticipation of loss. The low-grade fear of abandonment dressed up as missing someone. That relief wasn't happiness. It was your system returning to baseline after a false alarm. And the more often that cycle runs, the anxiety, the waiting, the relief, the more you train yourself to need it. The body starts craving the resolution. And soon you are not just attached to the person. You are addicted to the emotional cycle they create in you. The second truth. Dependency is maintained not by what they give you, but by what you have stopped giving yourself. This is where it becomes uncomfortable. When you are emotionally dependent on someone, there is always a list of things you have quietly stopped doing for yourself. You stopped sitting with your own thoughts without distraction. You stopped making decisions without consulting them first. You stopped spending time alone and calling it good time. You stopped trusting your own read on situations. You handed those functions over, piece by piece, and they became the one who holds you together. Now here is the dangerous part. Sometimes the person you are dependent on is not even aware of this arrangement. They did not ask for the weight. They did not sign up to be your emotional architecture, but you built it that way. And now every interaction with them carries invisible pressure. The pressure of someone who needs a specific response to feel okay. And people can feel that pressure. They cannot always name it, but they feel it. And over time, that pressure does one of two things. Either it suffocates the relationship slowly, or it teaches the other person that they hold power over you. And some people, consciously or not, will use that. Stop for a moment. Ask yourself this honestly. Do you treat this person the same way when you feel secure as when you feel afraid of losing them? If the answer is no, if your behavior shifts depending on how stable the connection feels, then you are not loving freely. You are managing. You are managing their perception of you, managing the distance between you, managing the conditions under which you feel safe. And that kind of management is exhausting. It is also completely invisible to the person watching you from the outside. They just see someone who seems a little too eager, a little too available, a little too affected by small things, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. The third truth. You cannot be emotionally free inside a relationship you are afraid to lose. Read that again. Fear of loss and genuine connection cannot occupy the same space. The moment you become afraid of losing someone, every interaction becomes a negotiation. Every silence becomes a test. Every distance becomes evidence of something going wrong. And you start acting from that fear without realizing it. You over-explain when you don't need to. You go quiet when you should speak. You agree with things you don't believe. You laugh off things that actually bothered you. You present a version of yourself engineered for their continued approval rather than one that is simply honest. This is the slow erosion of self that happens inside emotional dependence. It is not dramatic. It does not happen all at once. It happens the way erosion always happens, one small accommodation at a time, until one day you look up and realize you cannot remember what you actually think, feel, or want when they are not the reference point. Here is something most people never say out loud. Sometimes emotional dependence feels like intimacy. The constant thinking about them. The way your mood tracks theirs. The feeling that no one else really gets you the way they do. All of this mimics closeness, but it is not closeness. Closeness is two separate people choosing each other. What you are describing is one person who has dissolved into the orbit of another. And people who are dissolved are not attractive. They are not interesting. They are not someone you want to build something real with. They are someone you learn to manage, or eventually, someone you walk away from. Not out of cruelty, but because the weight of being needed that completely becomes impossible to carry. Dependence drives people away, and in driving them away, it confirms the fear that started the whole cycle. The fourth truth: the recovery from emotional dependence is not about distance. It is about reconstruction. Most people think the answer is simply to pull back, to stop texting first, to create space. And yes, those things help. But they are surface-level adjustments to a deeper structural problem. The real work is rebuilding the inner architecture that you gave away. That means learning to sit with your own company and finding it sufficient. Not comfortable, sufficient. That is the honest standard. You are not trying to feel euphoric alone. You are trying to feel stable alone. To trust your own thoughts without needing them validated. To make decisions and live with them without requiring reassurance. To build a version of yourself that has a center, not a center that holds because someone else is there, but one that holds regardless. This is not easy. It will feel like isolation at first, because you have trained yourself to interpret aloneness as abandonment. But it is not abandonment. It is the beginning of self-possession. And self-possession changes everything. It changes how you move in a room. It changes how you speak. It changes how much space you take up without trying to. It changes how people respond to you. Not because you have become colder, but because you have become solid. And there is a quality in solid people that others cannot help but notice. They do not chase. They do not shrink. They do not perform. They are simply present from a place that does not require management, and that quality, that stillness that comes from a person who genuinely does not need to be somewhere else, is the most compelling thing you can be. The fifth truth: the person you are most afraid to lose will respect you most when you stop being afraid to lose them. This is not a tactic. It is not a game. It is a psychological reality. When someone knows they are your source, your anchor, your emotional center, they cannot fully respect you. Not because they are bad, because you have positioned yourself below them without meaning to. Every act of need communicates something. Every anxious reach communicates something. And the message it sends, regardless of your intentions, is, I am not complete without you. That message places them in authority over your experience. And authority without effort breeds something quiet but destructive in relationships. The slow disappearance of tension, mystery, and genuine regard. They stop seeing you as someone to pursue. They start seeing you as someone to manage. But the moment you reclaim your own center, genuinely, not as a performance, something shifts. Suddenly there is a version of you they have not fully seen. A version that does not need them. And that version is far more interesting. The sixth truth: emotional independence is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel without collapsing. People confuse independence with detachment. They think that in order to stop being dependent, they must stop caring. That the goal is to become someone who does not feel deeply. Someone untouchable. Someone cold. That is not it. The goal is to care without needing. To want without demanding. To love without dissolving. There is a version of you that can feel the full weight of a connection and still remain intact when it shifts. Still remain whole if it ends. Not because you feel less, but because you have built a self that exists outside the relationship. A self that has its own interests, its own standards, its own sense of direction. A self that brings something to the table. not because it is trying to impress, but because it was building long before this person arrived, and will continue building if they leave. That is not coldness. That is the only kind of love worth giving. Here is the question that nobody asks. What are you getting from the dependency? Because it is giving you something. Dependency always does. It gives you a sense of certainty in an uncertain world. It gives you someone to orbit when you haven't yet decided where you are going on your own. It gives you the feeling of being chosen, and being chosen by the right person you have decided makes you more real, more worthy, more confirmed. But confirmation from outside yourself is like borrowed light. It is warm for a moment. And then the source moves, and you are in the dark again. The only light that stays is the one you generate yourself. And the only way to generate it is to stop borrowing from someone else and start building what should have been there from the beginning. That building is uncomfortable. It requires sitting with the discomfort of your own company, of your own silence, of your own unfinished questions about who you are when no one is watching. But on the other side of that discomfort is something that no relationship can give you and no person can take away. A self that belongs to you. You were not made to orbit someone else's gravity. You were made to generate your own. The person worth having in your life is the one who chooses you when you are not performing, when you are not managing, when you are not shrinking, when you are simply there, present, whole, unafraid. And the only way to attract that is to become it first, not for them, for the version of you that has been waiting beneath all the need. Stop reaching. Stop monitoring. Stop building your life around a signal that was never yours to control. And when the silence comes, because it will come, let it. Sit in it. Find out what is on the other side. Because what you will discover there is more dangerous to your old self than anything another person could ever do to you. But emotional dependence is only one side of this. There is a darker dynamic beneath it, one that most people never recognize until it is already operating on them. The way certain people identify dependence and then deliberately use it. The mechanics of it are precise, almost clinical, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. That is the next conversation.